Thank you, everyone, for coming to the talk, and Europeana for giving me this opportunity to talk about SUCHO, which is the thing that has occupied myself next to work for the last 7 months or so. So I would like to go right in. Just a short intro of myself. As Jolan said, I'm an IT consultant for digital humanities at the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage in Vienna. I'm one of 3 SUCHO co-founders. The other ones are Anna Kias from Tufts University in the US and Quinn Dombrowski from Stanford University. And fairly recently, I've become also a member of the steering committee of the Europeana Ukraine working group, which we haven't been able to do so much yet, but I hope maybe today is an opportunity to change that a little bit, because I'll have specific asks for some of you to bring in your expertise. I also curate a digital history tool directory called timpopedia.org, and if you want to find me on Twitter, you find me under the handle StoryTracer. But okay, enough of shameless plugging. Let's go to why I'm here. So what is SUCHO? SUCHO, right now, in the state that it's right now, is a global grassroots initiative of more than 1,500 volunteers from institutions all around the world. Our main task is to support the digital preservation of Ukrainian cultural heritage. And we consist mostly of librarians, archivists, digital humanists, researchers, and technologists as well, but this is not an exclusive list. It's really an open grassroots initiative, and we have people from all walks of life in there. So what we have achieved so far is we have archived over 5,000 websites of Ukrainian cultural institutions containing their public digital collections. So, and that amounts to around 50 terabytes of web archives. And more recently, as we've moved into more projects, we have also raised over 200,000 euros for digitization equipment to digitize materials that are not digitized in Ukraine yet. If you want to know more about SUCHO, you can visit our website or contact us via email as well if you would like to have a cooperation or something. And on Twitter also you find us under SUCHO.org, where we post regular updates and also live tweet our virtual community meetings, which we're holding once a month now. So if you want to know what's the kind of state of affairs, Twitter is the best place to find that out. So what am I going to talk about today? Number one is, the first part is the SUCHO mission. So all the projects that we have realized so far, we're still working on, which is the web archives, the SUCHO gallery, the SUCHO meme wall, our wiki, and the equipment fund. And a bit also the kind of recipe of SUCHO. So how did we manage to collaborate with so many volunteers? And what does that mean for grassroots collaboration in general? Then I would like to outline the next steps for the digital preservation of Ukrainian cultural heritage that we don't do alone. We're only one initiative, of course. And in the second part of the talk, I would like to get more abstract and reflect a bit on the lessons we might be able to learn from SUCHO. So in order to answer such questions as, how can you enable more of such grassroots collaboration across institutional boundaries? Which dangers for digital cultural heritage exist that we might have not thought about in detail before? I'm sure some of you have, but the question of if it's at the front of everyone's mind is, I guess, a really important one. And then also on a more abstract level, how can institutions in future collaborate better to protect, for example, on a European, but also on a global level, digital cultural heritage? But first about the core of our initiative, which was the web archives. I mean, it's still going on, but there's a lot more than just the web archives. So it all really started on Twitter with the tweet from Anna Kias, my co-founder, who 2 days after the invasion asked her fellow musicologist, Anna is a music librarian at Tufts University, to join her in a virtual data rescue session at the end of the week of that week of invasion. Anna has been involved in data rescue sessions before. I had never heard about it, but this is something that people have been doing in any kind of disaster response. So for example, also with the hurricane in Puerto Rico a few years ago. I saw that tweet and commented on it because in my work at the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage, I had been just the weeks before testing a new web archiving tool, which is called Web Recorder, which is actually a suite of tools that enable to create, let's say, more high fidelity versions for archives of websites that might be very media heavy or very interactive, where maybe classical crawlers have a problem dealing with them. And I said, well, web archiving might be a choice as well. Tried to go to bed and couldn't sleep. Because as I suggested that, I was thinking about, well, maybe by the end of the week, there's nothing left to save. Like, this is really important. I need to try it. So I started trying to archive some of the websites I found. I'm not a Ukraine specialist, but I looked for digital collections and tried downloading them with the web recorder tools. And what I did the next day was I just asked people on Twitter to submit to a Google form the digital collections that they knew. So the response was really overwhelming, and people from all around the world who might have expertise in Ukrainian cultural heritage, not all of them are Ukrainian, but they might be researchers which know very specialist collections of digitized cultural heritage, started submitting to that form. And then Quinn joined us. Quinn is also the co-president of the Association for Computer and the Humanities in the US. So she's a very prolific digital humanist and also active on Twitter. And yeah, by the second day, we had 400 volunteers. And then the problematic started, okay, what do we do now? Like, how do we go about this? And so maybe I should backtrack a little bit and ask a question that many people have asked us that might not be familiar with web archiving. Why do you need to do that? Like, why is emergency web archiving necessary at all? Well, because first of all, it's not self-evident for everyone that, digitized cultural heritage collections are housed on physical servers that might be unique, that might be in-house, that might be, a single physical object that can be destroyed. And in a war, the scenarios that can destroy a server range from physical destruction through bombing, shelling, looting, also to indirect effects like power blackouts, cyber attacks, a huge issue in this scenario, but also internet outages, or if an occupier like Russia takes over your infrastructure, rerouting of internet traffic. So all these factors can lead to the effect that suddenly a super important digitized version, which might be the only version because the physical objects might also be destroyed by war, are suddenly at risk of being completely lost. And the second thing why web archiving turned out to be a good approach in this emergency situation was because we didn't have to ask the Ukrainian institutions for participation in a time where they were under extreme threat of their life. And of course, we would like to have the clean, the raw data that is the better data, so to speak. But in this case, we could just go ahead and didn't need to bother these institutions and the professionals to say, okay, let's just download as much as we can for safekeeping. Well, it really came to a kind of focus for me how non-self-evident the use of this is when a journalist spoke to me in March of 2022, and he asked a very simple question. But doesn't the internet back itself up? Like, why do you have to do this at all? And that was really an eye-opener for me for, people who might be digitally involved, if it's technologists or, people like us who work with digital cultural heritage, how far removed we might be from the general public in thinking about, what the internet is and being aware that what is a server and these things. I think what plays into the kind of question that I got, that I think we can chuckle about, but I think it's a very good question to outline, well, how does the internet work and why does it need to be backed up if there are things that we care about, is, a bit the cloud. I think the cloud and the kind of the concept of the cloud has introduced a kind of magical thinking that, because things are in the cloud, they are automatically safe and nobody has to take care of them. And so I think was a really good eye-opening moment for us to say, okay, we need to make more people aware how fragile the internet actually is. And just to kind of outline it, I don't have to go into the details of it, but if you think of it, the internet is really made of people. Anything from a webmaster to the people who work at ISPs, to the people who actually are the nodes that connect, internet companies to each other, that literally lay the cables and register the domains. These are all people who have to actively maintain the infrastructure. And so if this chain of internet custodians that all depend on each other is broken in a situation like a war, there is ripple effects, and many things can go offline, and you don't know why, because part of the infrastructure has failed. So if we think about, where should you focus, like where do you start to archive things, like, if you care about content, back it up, because you cannot guarantee that not one link in the chain will fail. So what kind of content did we back up then, and how much of it is offline? One example I can give, which was a very dramatic example for me personally, but also an uplifting one at the same time, is the website of the State Archive of Kharkiv. So the State Archive of Kharkiv was one of the websites that I claimed as a volunteer, that I tried to save myself. And on the morning of the 3rd of March, I actually succeeded with the download. It was 100 gigabytes of data. And the data that you find on the website of the State Archive of Kharkiv might not adhere to ideal, model of how a archive should look like, because it's a WordPress website. And on that WordPress website, there's PDFs uploaded. But these PDFs are extremely important, valuable, irreplaceable documents. They document the Holodomor, they document Stalinist purges in the 30s, so they are literally containing the names of people who were shot, sent to the Gulag, or otherwise politically repressed, and also more banal data like genealogy data, census data, and so on. So as I finished this download, it then transpired a few hours later, like actually in 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that the website was down. So I had just made it with the download. And a few hours later, we actually found out that the State Archive of Kharkiv had been shelled, and there was video from the State Archive service in Ukraine of the damage that was done to the archive. And that was it. The website was offline. Now, luckily, as I was putting together this presentation, I found out that very recently it has come back online, but for I think like 5 months or so, it was offline. And this is kind of the ideal situation that we would like to have as an initiative, because we don't want to keep our backups. We want to delete them as soon as it's possible, right? These are not our backups, this is not our data, but because you cannot know what could be lost, we really need to save it just in case. So I'm very, very happy that this website is back online, because I really had a personal connection to it, and I think it is extremely historical data. Another example of things that are unfortunately offline and we haven't seen come back online is, for example, this historical society. Our horizon of what constitutes cultural heritage also broadened extremely, because people put things in the list that we might not have thought about, like youth centers or archaeological excavation sites, 3D tours of museums, or all these things, which were quite a challenge to back up. But yeah, this website unfortunately has gone down and hasn't come up since then. We have the archive just in case. And another very poignant example, I guess, is the library of Cherson, the regional library. Because as you probably know, Cherson is occupied right now, and this library has, data that really you can't find anywhere else, like the catalogs from 1874 of this library. So it's also metadata about the institutions themselves, in a sense, that is contained in digitized form there. And it is very technically interesting why this website went down. We cannot say with certainty, but when you go to the domain, this is the archived version. When you go to the original domain, it says this account has been suspended. And this is a scenario that we only discovered very late in our initiative, that because we were trying to figure out which servers are most at risk. Is it the servers at the front line? Is it servers that are hosted by companies that might be in an area that is at the front line? Should we only look at Ukrainian domains? And we realized even if a website is hosted safely abroad, let's say in Germany or in some other country, what can happen is that the bills don't get paid and the website still goes down. And you couldn't know possibly why the bills don't get paid. Maybe someone shut it down. Maybe Russian occupation authorities deliberately shut this down, but maybe just the person that was supposed to renew the subscription of the website, of the hoster, wasn't available because they are at the front, they had to flee, or any kind of other scenario you can imagine. So really what transpired from that is that, we needed to really save anything we could get our hands on. So a bit about the tools we've been using. I've been mentioning Web Recorder. And so Web Recorder, as I said, is a suite of tools for web archiving. And the main thing that you could say is the archiving engine is the Browsertrix crawler. This is the main tool that we've been using for this. As a ground rule, the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, has been our first point of contact. First, we submit everything to the Internet Archive. Also in bulk, we had to make a special tool to kind of submit like hundreds of thousands of URLs in bulk. But we quickly figured out that especially with digital heritage collections, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine sometimes hits a wall because websites are very media heavy or interactive. So what Web Recorder does differently, which adds to the fidelity of the archives, is that when you want to compare it, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine really behaves like a machine, like a robot. And what Web Recorder does, it actually spins up an instance of Google Chrome and then sees the website how a human user would do. So some of the functions that we are used to from websites today that are user interface functions, like for example, if you go on websites like Airbnb, and there's infinite scrolling, right? So you keep on scrolling and more data gets loaded. This is really difficult for the Wayback Machine to capture. And the crawler of the Wayback Machine, Heritrix, is used by a lot of national libraries as well, so they will have the same problems. Web Recorder, by emulating human behavior, really does things that we would find silly when we think about automating things, but it does things like waiting for things to be loaded, clicking on every video and these things. So we quickly figured out that this was a really good tool if we really cared that the things that are important, like the files, the media and so on, is saved. Luckily, the developer of Web Recorder, Ilya Kramer, was on our team, so he was able to also spin up at some point a cloud version, a user-friendly version of Browsertrix, which had a huge effect on the amount of things that our volunteers could do. But it was like a pre-alpha version. He wasn't really ready for that, so we really appreciate that he did that. And what's another thing that's good about Web Recorder is that what comes out at the end is a new format that's called Web Archive Collection Zipped, WAX. And that format, like broken down to what the advantage is, that this is a single file. Our biggest web archive is actually 1.4 terabyte big, and it's a single file containing all the media and so on. But the software is developed so good that with the viewer of Web Recorder, which is called Replay Web Page, you can load this file from a server or locally, and it only loads on demand as you click through the website. So when you open the file, it only loads the home page, and then gradually, if you use more of the website, it actually loads more data. So it's super efficient, and it works super nicely. But in our thinking, what's really important is, because it is a single file, it is very easy to give back. Because otherwise, giving web archives back to an institution which we would like to restitute it to is a real problem. There's a lot of complicated formats. This is a file, you can see it with the viewer, and you have the archive. So all of that made a huge difference in our kind of like stack in our tool chain. And in terms of collaboration, how we coordinated each other and had these 1,500 volunteers doing, tasks efficiently, we went with the first best thing that everybody was used to, which was Slack and Google Sheets. Not only because we couldn't set up an alternative straight away, because it was actually very clear from the beginning that otherwise it would be a threshold, because people don't like to make accounts. If you don't use the tools that people are already familiar with, you're erecting a barrier for them to participate. So because so many people use Slack for work, and because so many people use Google Sheets, we just went with it and said, let's roll. So what then came out of it was this master spreadsheet where many things are collected in between. And on the right, you see only a selection of the various Slack channels that we have of different task force and working groups that do all kinds of projects that I don't even know how it works. And it's quite interesting because this spreadsheet, which at some point I observed had 140 people editing it simultaneously at the same time. And I have to say, okay, I have to give that to Google. Okay, that's very impressive, because not much software can do that. And it has obviously thousands of rows and 20 tabs and so on. So that it worked in that scenario really was a game changer. Okay, we can just work on this. And so what happened in the spreadsheet mainly is that people would claim a website, right? So they said, I will try to save this. I will try to save this. And if something didn't work as planned, they would write comments, say what's wrong with it, maybe give it to someone else. But this is where everything happened. And this spreadsheet became so endeared to us that it actually became kind of a character or like a volunteer itself. So at some point, it was actually featured on Dutch TV, of all places. And since then, it's only been known at SUCHO internally as the gigantische spreadsheet. I hope I didn't butcher this too much. But they actually had a subheading, just talking about this spreadsheet, which this was an interview with a volunteer, Mieke Simons. But it really illustrates the importance of that spreadsheet. Without the spreadsheet, nothing would have worked, right? That's just one of the ways we had to collaborate on the fly, because we didn't have time or leisure to construct an infrastructure, right? We just had to get going and try to distribute the tasks. So what came out of that collaboration then was a couple of self-organized workflows, which I think are extremely and highly professional. I mean, these are all professionals working on it, of course. But this is kind of what was happening then in Slack and in the Google Sheet. First of all, there was discovery, right? So what is there to save? It came mainly out of the Google form of people transmitting from all over the world. But then we had specialists from this field of cultural heritage and open data and so on, who would add more things that we might not know about. So the Wikidata team scoured Wikipedia entries for museums that we might have not known about. There were people actually who we bought domain data for. So I didn't know that either. You can buy a list of all the domains in the world. It costs around like $100. And then you can work with that, and then actually gives you extra information, for example, for a very difficult problem, which would be, if something has a .org or .com domain, is it still in Ukraine? How do you figure that out? So these were the various ways people discovered things. People also walked the streets of Ukrainian towns looking for museum signs or stuff like that. So that was kind of like, I wasn't involved with these at all, but it was kind of mind-blowing. And then, of course, there was a prioritization, which we solved by giving it kind of like personally to people, taking responsibility, saying, if something is important to you, please take care of it. Try to get it. Trying to figure out how difficult it is to crawl. Maybe you need to write a custom strip for it, or you need to go through it manually, because Web Recorder also allows that, to manually record a website by having a Chrome add-on and just recording it as you click through it. And then in the end, very important as well, quality control of people who actually are multilingual Ukrainian speakers, because many of our volunteers, like myself, don't speak Ukrainian and didn't know what they were trying to save. So at some point we needed to check, is the thing that was supposed to be important in there, like the PDFs, so were they actually captured? Because it's a very complicated process. What kind of infrastructure did we run it on? Well, first of all, we started on the volunteers' devices themselves. And so everybody who wanted to learn, how to do this, actually had to learn Docker. And that was a huge task. And this is the amazing thing that Quinn and Anna did, teaching people technical skills that I could never have imagined. Later on, we got donated cloud server capacity from the tech industry as well. And by now, we have storage mirrors at scientific institutions in Europe and North America, because we want to be really, really safe that this data is in good hands and not just in private hands as well, but also copied as much as possible, because in the end, what I'm personally most afraid for is that I press the wrong button and suddenly the data is gone. But what that really kind of turned out to be then is, like one of our volunteers described very aptly, I think, is a kind of digital Dunkirk, she called it, because really anything that would digitally float was put to task, right? We had people from MIT who were recruiting an army of Raspberry Pis, doing crawling on itself, because you don't need much power to do crawling. You just need to do it a lot at the same time. So parallelization is really the key to that. But again, seeing people doing that, that have never worked at that kind of digital skill level before, was quite astonishing. So yeah, in time, we got then a lot of partners, a lot of sponsors that helped us. And what that allowed us to do then is actually to spin up what I said before, a cloud version of Browsertrix. And it was a huge, huge change, of course, because all it required someone to do is to log in, select a website, and then you could actually watch the machine, save it as you go. So you could see while you were crawling a website if something was going wrong. And all of that obviously enabled a lot more volunteers to participate and also to scale the operation, so to speak. What that meant in the end, and again, all the benefit of all the fame for that goes to Quinn and Anna, because they are specialists in explaining complicated technical tasks to lay people, let's say. At some point, she recruited her son and her elementary school his elementary school class. So there was a bunch of children in California saving Ukrainian websites together. And she will tell me time and again that it's his favorite thing to do before to go to bed, in order not to go to bed. But yeah, I mean, this is a scale I couldn't have imagined. This was the combination of easily usable technology, then with, of course, a kind of volunteer spirit. So, but that was phase one of web archiving. We're still web archiving, but it's not the only thing we do anymore. And the second phase was really based, on feedback we got from Ukraine. And we put the slogan there, curate, donate, educate, as the kind of things that still need to be done that cannot be solved or done with web archiving. So the feedback we got really was that what is still needed was a meeting that Sophie Tas actually invited me. I'm eternally grateful for it. It was 300 Ukrainian cultural professionals in one big Zoom meeting. We had the opportunity for the first time after a month or so to ask, okay, what is the priority still here? So the first one was to raise awareness for Ukrainian culture. Secondly, to get hardware, to digitize all the things that are not digitized yet. To support and train people in best practices of metadata standards and curation and so on. And also to have platforms to upload these things to, because they just don't exist and they're not accessible on a Ukrainian level. So what we've been doing so far is we created the SUCHO Equipment Fund. And the Equipment Fund is a separate budget that has is transparent from the operational budget where we pay our server costs from, for example, where Europeana, I have to say, is still the top donor. I'm very grateful for that. And what we're trying to do is get the IT equipment from suppliers from the inside the Ukrainian economy to also support the Ukrainian economy. If anyone has an opportunity to maybe know of a donor, we are now also ready to accept institutional donations that can receive a tax-deductible receipt. But this is where like this rather big sum of over 200,000 euros, 160,000 euros in cash has flown into. Then we created the SUCHO gallery, which is based on Omeka, where we exhibit selected items from the web archives that we did. But like the end game there is to actually make it a first step of a digitization platform where institutions that receive digitization equipment and have maybe no prior experience in metadata standards or digital collection creation can just start straight away until a proper platform is ready for that. So right now it's curated by the SUCHO volunteers, but we really want this platform to be there to be used by Ukrainians in the institution at some point. Another project that I had nothing to do, that was just coming out of a specialist team, is the SUCHO meme war, which archives the Ukrainian war memes that are produced a lot right now on Twitter and Reddit and so on, which really are an invaluable source of digital cultural heritage as it happens. Like this is it immediate. And so this team has been very active in archiving these things, like preemptively. And what we also created is a wiki where we try to save all the things that we learned and then also translate it into Ukrainian, going beyond what we have done as SUCHO. But obviously, thinking about, tutorials of how to digitize or on how to enrich with metadata and so on. So I'm very happy that the equipment fund is actually already on the way. So our first delivery has arrived a few weeks ago at the Ukrainian National Library, which has a huge demand for equipment because it's not the newest, and they're also getting hacked like continuously. But we hope that it's only the first institution we can help, and we actually have just a few days ago had the first opportunity to buy a professional book scanner for a regional library, which also engages in digitizing children's drawings of traumatized, displaced refugee children. So these are the kinds of small institutions that we really would like to support there. So what are the next steps for Ukrainian cultural heritage? And so we don't do everything. That's the biggest thing as well. So we've been asked by UNESCO, IFLA, and the Ukrainian Library Association to help with the creation of a national digital library of Ukraine. And it is obviously a huge project. It is not something that SUCHO can do. But we have, of course, said, well, we have a lot of the professionals who run these digital libraries everywhere, who know the expertise, and we would really like to try to put together an international technical advisory board so people can discuss the details of what is necessary to make this happen. So this is where I would ask you directly, everybody here and online as well, please talk to your fellow Europeana members, in Europeana Tech, in the Aggregators Forum, in the, Just Members Association. Please take the lead on this, because we are not the experts on this. They need substantial help, and you know how much work it is to just set meetings, organize conversations, synthesize the things that are discussed there, and then actually, come to maybe a workable solution. The same thing is needed for museums. There is a platform that is proprietary, that is very good, it has a good spirit, Museum Digital, that people are already using, but obviously we would like an open source version for that as well. Again, I would like to ask people with expertise in setting up digital collections to really come forward and help us form this technical advisory board. Here just some of the extremely complicated questions that would need to be discussed there. There's also a good role model, which is the Digital Library of the Middle East, which was created by Stanford a while ago, which has the same kind of problems of being, for example, decentralized because many institutions contribute, so multi-tenant, but it's a single platform where people upload things. And all these things, expert questions need to be discussed, and I would again really like the Europeana community to help with that. Okay, but now a bit to step back about, if we reflect ourselves, and I also would like to be really curious about your opinions on our ideas on that. What can we learn from this experience that is by no means finished? We would love for it to be finished immediately because the war ends, but it doesn't look like that. Going beyond the special case of Ukraine, what can we learn from this experience of building a volunteer community with software and these expertise? First of all, kind of a general question, how to facilitate more of this kind of grassroots collaboration in a more sustainable way? Because I think it's actually a very important opportunity after the pandemic, where we do a lot of remote work in the workplace, but that is, only to earn money, to see that, we can form remote digital collectives as well that use the same kind of tools, but do, civic society tasks, do really like non-profit, good work, let's say. You need it in volunteering, you need it in activism, but you could also imagine it, if you work at different research institutions and want to do projects together that don't have any funding, but you still want to collaborate, well, how do you do it, right? How do you get together online to organize something like that? The stumbling blocks that I have identified in terms of the tools that can bring you together are that if you use commercial platforms, first of all, you usually are built by seat. If you use Notion or Airtable of these platforms, it's very expensive to use the software. And then you're obviously also locked into the commercial platform. We had yesterday a bit of a talk about that. Then on the other hand, if an institution has taken software and provides it for its members, for example, installs Omeka installations and so on, well, usually only the members of these institutions can access them. So that doesn't really help if you want to, collaborate across institutional boundaries. And then on top of that, some of the lessons that we learned from just the community work aspect, there's also some philosophical questions. How do you approach something like that? One of the most important lessons that we learned was that it's really important to meet people where they are. You could wish for people to have certain digital skills, and you could wish, all the things they could do. If you, as organizers, don't write extremely good tutorials and make really good workshops, crash courses, and so on, you cannot expect from people to do that. So again, Quinn and Anna, technology librarians who are skilled professionals in doing this, but it also takes just grit. I remember Anna at the beginning of this, I think, if I'm not wrong, organizing 3 live Zoom workshops a day, just to get the ball rolling. So if you really care about something, that is also what it takes, and people will appreciate that and then be more ready to take up, the challenge of learning really complicated skills. And what that meant in our specific case when we wanted to work with Web Recorder was that suddenly we were able to teach people, or people learned, that's how I should be better, learn to use the command line and use Docker, who had never opened a terminal before. This is a very tech thing to do, but these were just people who knew how to use browser, email, and so on, the normal tasks. So, the sky is the limit there. People are willing to learn it if they think it's worthy a cause, but it needs very good self-learning resources. Also, as I mentioned, I think that it's really important that you have familiar tools and user experiences if you're not doing a very specific task. So for the mundane tasks of coordinating, collaborating, and so on, I would not outright reject proprietary tools like Google Sheets or Slack, for example. I would always prefer an open source solution, but when the time is right, not at the beginning when you just need to bring people together and get things started. That was a really big lesson, so that you cannot, have the ideal solution at the beginning. And I think what is a great opportunity is to host many of the open source services that are out there, that are available to download and host yourself, but really make it available to the general public in a responsible way. I think there's a huge opportunity for certain institutions or communities to do that. The second thing, of course, is open knowledge. What these self-learning resources can do is just beyond your imagination. A couple of months in, we learned that a different initiative had just started doing the same thing that we did without telling us even. So Save Hong Kong Online has used the same tools, the same tutorials that we have written to save Hong Kong media sites because they are afraid they will go down, go censored, and so on. So, open knowledge really at work. So you don't know who's going to use these things that you create. I mean, I think lots of us, agree on that. And I mean, just to give some, concrete alternatives of tools that can replace commercial platforms, but that need someone to actually maintain and host them, there's a replacement for almost everything. Base row is a replacement for Airtable and Google Sheets, where you can, on the fly, design a database and can change your data model just as nicely as you can do with Airtable, for example. It's a Dutch company, actually, which has an open core business model. So you can sign up directly on the website and pay an amount of money to use it out of the box, but you can also install it on your own server and just use it for free. Same as with Element. It's just a federated, even more secure and private Slack replacement. Outline is a wiki and knowledge base, which really works the same user-friendly way as Notion. Wiki.js, which we use for our wiki as well, has the same user-friendliness as some of the commercial alternatives out there. And Etherpad is a really good user-friendly, what you see is what you get editor by now, but it throws out Markdown, so the kind of formats we would like to use and also preserve when we produce documents and want to later on connect them through open link data and so on. So these things exist, they are ready, they are well maintained, but someone needs to go there, install them, and be ready to give it to strangers for free. Now the thing is that I believe that the marginal costs of doing that is actually insignificant. Like, you will not have so many people working at the same time. So you won't have excessive traffic. Yeah, it's really, you can do it with 100 euros, 50 euros, 1,000 euros a month, depending on how many people you want to get access. But people need to step forward and provide these tools to activists, to communities that want to connect and do the same kind of self-organization that we have done. And then on the other side, how can we, avoid having to do a thing like SUCHO again? Because we don't want to do it again. We think it should be unnecessary, and why do we have to do it at all? What I gathered from the conversations I was having with cultural heritage professionals from all over the world who called me, who wrote me, as they saw what we were doing, is that this is not a problem of Ukraine or war. It really doesn't take a war for such a data loss to happen. There's a lot of natural and man-made disasters that have destroyed, cultural heritage institutions. Actually, this is a picture from Cologne, my hometown, where by complete coincidence, I saw the collapse of this Cologne Municipal Archive in 2009 live. This is my school right there. So I'm very, very attuned to the fragility of physical objects in cultural heritage institutions. But what I've gathered from the conversations with professionals is that the same kind of awareness doesn't necessarily exist for the digitized collections. To quote someone in a leading position of an international association, he said that we have very extensive plans for protection against fire, flooding, and all kinds of things that can happen to our physical things. But our server is sitting next to the toilet. The toilet could flood and the server is gone. And because many institutions, because of privacy considerations, really like to host their service in-house, on-premise, they're actually more at risk, let's say, than non-public institutions. So I think this is a topic that we should start talking about. And I would like to ask all of you, right here in the room that you work with digital collections, do you know where the servers of your institutions are? Do you know if there's backups, And are there backups in different places? And I would like all of us to think more about, if we really are aware of how fragile the data is. Again, it doesn't take a disaster. It can also be link rot or software rot, just outdated software. You change permalinks, or funding dries up for collections, right? These are all dangers to digitized collections. And when we think then about how not only individuals that are volunteers can collaborate, but how we can work better to protect this shared cultural heritage, we have had some ideas about how we maybe could, foster cross-institutional collaboration. So Quinn had a very simple idea that I love, which is mutual archiving of institutions. If you imagine twin cities, city partnerships, like many places have these kind of, informal relationships. Why don't we suggest to institutions, pick institutions at the other end of the world, it doesn't have to be, can be in another country, right? And say, hey, we take care of each other's data. Because what we have seen is that if you take personal responsibility, like people care and it's not hard. But you need to sorry, the argument was too passionate. But can you still hear me? Sorry. Yeah, okay. So, very informal, like non-technical solutions, like, hey, let's make sure that I back up you and you back up me. I really like that idea. Of course, you could also think about bigger solutions. You could think about, backup spaces for national or international cultural heritage. Backup buttons for aggregators, because as far as I understand it, aggregators just aggregate, and not in every aggregator, I don't want to speak for everyone, there's a link to the actual original digital object. What might be linked is the site, the page containing the object, but that doesn't mean you can find it directly from that link. So you can't just say, hey, let's download all the data that is aggregated here. So there would need to be some data cleanup as well. I think all of these thoughts should be just surrounded around the principles of decentralized structures. They should be data sovereign, right? If possible, they should be on publicly funded or owned service. And there's also things that have been going on for years, mainly in governments, like the concept of data embassies, where you actively put your data in a different place to make sure, but you still try to take care of it. You just do it in a different place. So this is not completely new. I just think it might be a bit new to the world of digital cultural heritage. And since the data space is being created, would there maybe be space for a Europeana endangered data program? Who knows? Because one of the best advice that we ever got was from the British Library, who had created a handbook on saving endangered archives. So how to actually digitize in the field with minimal possibilities. So since Europeana is the space for digital cultural heritage data, maybe this is something that Europeana should also take up. And last but not least, I also have a very concrete way forward where I'm working on as part of my institution, the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage, together with a German partner, the National Research Infrastructure for Culture, where we really want to, experiment with different technologies which we think might be promising to enable such, operations. So first of all, creating a storage space, a really decentralized, self-replicating cloud storage where you can put all this data, because it's a lot of data. You can't just put it anywhere, right? You need first of all, you need a virtual hard drive in the cloud to kind of put these things. And then also a way to maybe use web archiving, because it's a good tool to catch everything, but then trying to extract the things that you really want to preserve from there and automatically enrich it with metadata by extracting it with intelligent algorithms. And then last but not least, taking all these repositories that are out there and aggregators and using the standardized connectors that we have, like OAI PMH and general, like, linked open data principles to discover things that we think should be, backed up. But this is not happening yet, and it's at the very early ideas of thinking about this problematic. So this is why I would also emphasize that I think a lot of experimentation needs to happen, and maybe you go down a wrong route first and then you see another way might work better. But I think it's a really important topic that should be at the forefront of many people's minds if we take this lesson from SUCHO seriously. And with that, my many slides are done. Thank you for your patience. And I would just like to say as well, now it's getting more in the news as well, but Ukraine needs all the help it gets. So please, in any way that's possible for you, doesn't have to be that way, can also be other ways, but support Ukraine materially and also, in spirit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. That was an awe-inspiring talk. I have a million questions.
I only gave you a little time, sorry.
We have time for a few of them. I will, most importantly, remember your plea at the end towards all of us, the professionals here, to support you if we can. So we'll get back to that in the end. First, I want to see if there's maybe a question in the room we want to get to. Yes, here in the front. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. I understand that the whole project mostly is about backup. What about restore?
That is a very good question. Thank you. So right now, we still are at the stage where we need to actually tidy up our backups, right? What we did can be described as the digital equivalent of throwing things at in the back of a truck, right? We just download and download and download it. So what we are doing right now, which is working, is that all these institutions where our volunteers work are starting to apply for, official money to hire Ukrainian refugees, for example, in Germany, at the libraries and the different institutions where we're involved, to start cleaning, sorting, and cataloging all these backups, because that goes beyond volunteer work. It's just too much work. We want it to be done by Ukrainians because it's Ukrainian data. And once that is going, we also hope then to bit by bit prioritize to say, okay, let's first of all look at the things that are offline, and then individually start contacting the institutions that we know it's offline. But we're also very aware that it might still not be the right time for that because there's a war still ongoing. So, but what is very, very important to us that Ukrainians take over at this stage. We try to finance it through our institutional means, through all the institutions where we have possibilities, and then we start the restitution process from there, and it's led and handled by Ukrainians. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll go to some questions online. Well, let's first go to this audience member in the back.
No questions, just words of thanks, greetings from Ukraine, and thank you, Sebastian, for your help in saving cultural heritage of my country. The Ukrainian army and you, Sebastian, are my heroes, and thank you a lot. Thank you, your team, your volunteers, and I believe that Victory Day will definitely come, and we celebrate it together. Thank you a lot, and thank you to everyone with Ukraine in your heart.
Thank you, that means a lot. Thank you.
It's a powerful message. Some questions from online. I have one from Alexandra who says, I was wondering if SUCHO is already in contact with the Art Loss Register. They have a huge database that is normally used in cases of looting or artworks that were stolen or looted or disappears and then suddenly appears somewhere else on the art market. As Ukrainian cultural heritage is under threat, SUCHO's digital information is invaluable to help avoid these fraudulent purchases.
Thank you very much. It's an extremely important question. Again, a kind of subtopic that I didn't think about at the beginning, that some volunteers of us have taken up, who are experts in this. Erica Peasley, who is has a humanities background, but now works as a risk manager. She is absolutely essential to our team, and she has been following just what is going on the ground. And that is something that's very close to her heart. I know she is doing things there. I don't know if we know about this specific register. I would really invite Alexandra to send us a link at info@sucho.org, because that would be a great way to connect. But we are very aware that our data actually is proof, sometimes the only proof of the existence of maybe even an institution, if it has been completely destroyed and wasn't that well known, like a small, museum, but also just the catalogs. So if there's even nothing digitized in the sense of a document or something like that, if just a catalog has been web archived, that could be a proof in actually international war criminal proceedings against the art looting, because we know it's happening en masse. Especially in Kherson, there has been looting of Scythian gold, and it's just a horrible, huge topic, and we're very aware. And I would like to give this ball to Erica so that she can connect with them. But we have several partners that are asking us about our data, and we're happy to share it. We also need to be a bit, careful who we give it to, because we don't want to make things a target. But we know there are very many good faith actors there that we can work with. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll get SUCHO and the Art Loss Register in contact with each other. I have one more online question from Susanna Anas, who asks, can you say a bit more about what curation would mean towards the end of your slides? You were talking about those, and what the specific needs are of Ukrainian GLAMs that this curation meets.
This is a very difficult question. Thank you, Susanna, by the way. She's a volunteer herself, so I like that kind of question from inside.
Full circle.
So, again, we don't want to impose. We don't want to patronize, right? Mm-hmm. This is not our place. We want to give possibilities. We want to give resources, but we would like to have more intense conversations about the needs. This last cooperation, really, that is 2 days old, that I mentioned, seems to confirm some of the things that we had in mind, which is that small mobile, for example, equipment is good, and is the first step then towards curation. Okay. This is what we think, but it might not apply to every institution. For example, there's places like the Center for Urban History in Lviv, which is leading and cutting edge in this field. So it would be very, very hard to generalize, and by establishing contact with institutions, by giving them resources, we hope that we can get more information about what other needs we can fulfill. Yeah, but very difficult question. Thank you, Susanna.
That's a very good answer to a difficult question, so thank you. We will have to close in a bit. Last question I would want to ask is that if people that were listening online or live are inspired by this and feel like they want to, join the fray, support SUCHO in any way they can, how do they get in contact with you? What are the first steps that they should have to take?
Yeah, there's a sign-up list for volunteers on our website. It was closed for several months as we moved from phase 1 to phase 2. So maybe you might have signed up already and waited a long time, but we were a bit overwhelmed with, managing all the volunteers as well. And we also noticed at some point that now is the time where we really need professionals. Right. So if you think you're a professional in any sort of shape in the sense of cultural heritage or technology or fundraising or these kind of things, please sign up through the Google form and we will let you in, because now it's open again and you can say how you can help. So you're more than welcome.
Amazing, thank you. Let's give one last hand to Sebastian for this wonderful presentation. Good luck.
Thank you.